What if someone who left long ago was still waiting for you? Not in some dream, not as a distant memory, but as a living presence. As if there were something unfinished, a connection that time and death couldn't sever. Have you ever felt this? As if a part of you remained tied to an old moment, a goodbye that never really happened? Today, I want to tell you something that completely changed the way I see life, death, and everything in between. My sister passed away when we were still children. She was small, sweet, full of light. And even after so many years, even with routine covering her memory like dust on a portrait, something about her never left me. It wasn't just longing. She was a silent presence, sometimes in my calmest thoughts, sometimes in my darkest moments, as if, deep down, I knew she was still close, that the bond of blood doesn't end with the last breath. It was in a moment of exhaustion, doubt, and pent-up feelings that everything happened. And it wasn't a simple memory. It was a real, intense experience, almost impossible to describe with ordinary words. A spiritual apparition, a message from the other side, a reunion, perhaps all of these. What matters is that, in that moment, time stood still. The distance between what we call life and what we call death simply disappeared. What she told me, with a peaceful gaze and a presence that warmed my chest like a forgotten embrace, was more than a message. It was a call to awareness, to forgiveness, to true connection. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover now may surprise you, especially if you've ever felt at some point that someone who's passed away still accompanies you in some way. And when something like this happens, when we find ourselves before a presence so familiar, so charged with love and yet shrouded in a mystery that goes beyond reason, everything inside us changes. Time bends, certainties become confused, and the heart understands. Even without words, it understands. But you know what really touched me? It was realizing that, as I shared this story, other people started telling me theirs too. Small signs, dreams that seemed more real than the next day, presences felt in the silence of a room or in the middle of a crowd. The truth is that every experience like this carries an immense power of healing, reconnection, and purpose. So if something similar has ever happened to you, or even if it was just a slight sensation, a persistent memory, an unexpected shiver, write it in the comments. I read everything with care because I know these stories are no coincidence. They have meaning. And sometimes, just by sharing, we begin to understand. And if this kind of content touches your heart, makes you reflect and see spirituality with greater depth and lightness at the same time, like this video, your interaction is what shows YouTube that this topic matters, that it deserves to reach more people who may be going through something similar right now. And if you want to continue this journey with me, following other stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Your subscription is crucial for this space to grow with truth, purpose, and soul, because together, we form a community that welcomes, shares, and transforms what was once pain into meaning. Her loss wasn't just a silence in the house. It was as if a part of my own childhood had been ripped away before I even understood what it meant to lose someone. I was still young when it all happened. We hadn't been together for many years, but the bond, that was something neither time nor memory could erase. She was light. Not that flashy light, no. It was that presence that made the world seem calmer, more right. She was the kind of child who smiled with her eyes, who knew when I was sad even without me saying a word. And even so young, she had a way of comforting as if she were older than all of us. I remember our little games in the backyard, the afternoons she'd wait for me to come home from school, the silly conversations that, at the time, seemed just part of the routine. But today, are rare gems in the depths of my memory. And then suddenly, she was gone. A quick illness, the kind you don't have time to explain. And I, too young to understand what the end meant, only realized that the place where she used to sit at the table was empty, and stayed that way for a long time. The people around me tried to distract me, made sweet excuses, talked about heaven and angels, but inside, all I felt was absence. It's strange how childhood grief sets in. It doesn't arrive with scandalous tears, nor with long goodbyes. It arrives with silences, with questions unanswered, with a longing the child feels but can't name, and so it remained, stored, like a letter written but never sent. I grew up carrying this hole with me. I did what anyone does. I carried on, but every now and then, amidst the hustle and bustle of adult life, a memory would surface, a phrase she'd said, a scent that resembled hers, and for brief seconds, it was as if she'd visited me, as if that absence were somehow alive. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what came next changed the way I understand presence, even in absence. As the years passed, her absence changed shape. It stopped being an open wound and became an invisible scar, the kind no one sees but we feel throbbing at certain moments. It wasn't something I talked about much, nor did anyone ask about it. Perhaps because when loss happens too soon, the world assumes we forget. That memory erases what was briefly experienced. But it wasn't like that for me. I grew up with the feeling that my sister still walked with me in some way, not in the obvious places, but in the shadows of life. There were days when I'd wake up with a senseless longing, for no apparent reason. Other times it was just a stray thought, an image of her smiling, or a feeling that I needed to pay attention to something. It was as if her memory had found a way to live silently within me, not to hold me captive to the past, but to remind me that there are bonds that time cannot undo. And the curious thing is that, even as time passed, I never felt it was over. The pain, yes, was transforming. The revolt I'd felt as a child turned to acceptance, and then a kind of tenderness, as if her presence had adapted to my absence, and vice versa. As a teenager, amidst so many changes and discoveries, sometimes it was her memory that brought me back to center. When something went wrong, when I felt alone or out of place, it was almost automatic to remember her gaze, that childlike gaze, yet filled with something inexplicable. Maybe it was innocence, maybe precocious wisdom. And there were also those moments when I felt like I needed someone to talk to, but couldn't find anyone. At those times, I would talk to her, in my thoughts, in prayer, or even in a low voice, when I was sure no one would hear. And you know what's strange? I felt like she was listening. I don't know if it was imagination, faith, or a real connection with something beyond what we see, but I felt it. And over time, it stopped being a comfort and became a kind of strength, as if, even without being here physically, she had continued to accompany me in the background of life, discreetly, without interfering, but without abandoning me. And it's curious how this feeling shaped my way of seeing the world, spirituality, and the very meaning of longing. Because instead of being a burden, she became a presence, a light presence, sometimes arriving in the form of a memory, other times in a dream, a scent, a song. And the most profound thing about it all is that I never felt fear, only a silent peace, as if something inside me knew she was where she needed to be, and that every now and then she still finds a way to make herself present. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what happened next made it all the more surprising. That day, everything seemed normal. I woke up at the same time, did the same things as always, followed my routine like any other morning, but there was something in the air that I still couldn't explain. It wasn't fear nor anxiety. It was a deep calm, different from the peace that soothes. It was a kind of inner silence, as if the world around me had lowered its volume so I could hear something more subtle. And it's strange how we perceive these changes without knowing exactly how to name them. It was as if I had suddenly been placed somewhere in between time, where thoughts came slower, sounds seemed more distant, and breathing became a kind of guide. Perhaps you've felt this. That moment when nothing extraordinary happens around you, but inside it feels like something is about to change, as if a door were about to open, silently, without warning, but with force. And it was in this suspended atmosphere that everything began to change. I was overcome by a strange urge to withdraw, not in the physical sense, but emotionally, to listen to myself more, to remember, to feel. Old things began to emerge, Memories from childhood, small fragments of the time when she was still here, alive in my mind with a clarity I no longer expected to feel. And then, on that seemingly ordinary afternoon, I felt something that stopped me. A gentle chill on my back, a shiver that started out of nowhere and spread throughout my body, but it didn't come from fear. It came from presence, as if someone were there, with me, in a space that wasn't visible but absolutely real. It was like a touch without contact, a gaze without eyes, a presence without a body. And the most surprising thing of all is that, in that moment, I didn't doubt. It was as if my heart recognized it before my mind could understand. It was at this point that I began to pay attention to the small details. The sound of the wind slowly passing by, the glow that filtered through the leaves of the tree outside, the clock that seemed to have slowed down. It was all subtle, yet at the same time charged with something inexplicable by logic. A different energy had filled that space, an energy that didn't scream, but filled everything. And even though the environment was the same, inside me, it wasn't. I felt that day, though it had begun like any other, was destined to become unforgettable. And there, between the ordinary and the inexplicable, I understood that something was approaching, something I couldn't see, but which my soul already seemed to know, as if a reunion were about to happen, and life was silently preparing me for it. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when the unexpected finally happened, it wasn't just a vision. It was an encounter that completely transformed my way of understanding what lies beyond. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it's impossible to describe that moment without reliving every sensation. Time truly stood still. It was as if I had crossed an invisible border between what we call reality and something beyond. I wasn't sleeping, nor dreaming, but it wasn't the same state of consciousness as usual either. It was as if my body was here, but my soul had moved on a little further. The air around me was bathed in a strange light, not blinding, but golden, soft, like the end of a never-ending afternoon. The air felt denser, yet at the same time light, as if every particle vibrated with an energy indescribable in words. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat, as if echoing in a silent cathedral. No voices, no outside noise, just this intense feeling that something sacred was about to happen. That's when she appeared. It didn't come out of nowhere like an explosion or a fright. It was more like an unfolding of the light itself, as if it had been there all along, just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And when my eyes met hers, it was like coming home after a long time lost. She was just as I remembered, but at the same time, there was something different. A glow, a kind of peace that seemed out of this world. Her loose hair, her soft features, her discreet smile, and her eyes. Oh, her eyes. There was such a profound silence in them that, even without a word, I already knew. She recognized me, and more than that, she was waiting for me. The vibration of her presence was warm, like an invisible embrace. But there was something even stronger behind that reunion, a truth I didn't yet fully understand, but which was already changing everything within me. I felt a knot loosen, a weight I'd carried since childhood, and until that moment I hadn't even realized how much it hurt. It was as if she were saying, without a sound, "I'm okay, and you will be too." There was no dialogue in the traditional sense. The words came not from mouths, but from emotion, from a connection that transcended any physical barrier. It was as if our souls were conversing, clearing old memories, exchanging courage. Everything there was pure feeling, pure meaning. Time didn't exist. Logic wasn't necessary. There was only now, and that now was her before me, alive on another plane, but as real as any presence I've ever touched. And it was in that moment that I understood that reunion wasn't just a consolation. It was a message, a turning point, a silent answer to the questions I'd carried for years, even without knowing how to formulate them. I didn't come back the same from that experience, and her presence still walks with me, even when my eyes can't see it. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened next was what truly dismantled me inside, in the best possible way. She didn't say a word, and yet every part of me understood exactly what that presence was trying to convey. It was as if the communication came from somewhere else, bypassing logic, bypassing conventional senses, a kind of silent truth, yet so intense that it seemed to fill the entire space around it. I didn't hear it with my ears. I felt it with my heart. The message was simple, but charged with a power that completely transformed the way I understand life. She looked at me with a calm that only those who have transcended time can achieve, and without moving her lips, everything became clear. You must move forward without fear. I am fine, and I am with you. These words were unspoken, but they were received as if engraved directly into my soul. It was as if a part of me, long dormant, had finally awakened. As if that ancient connection, severed by the pain of loss, had been restored, not in body, but in spirit. And that changed everything. Not because it gave me absolute answers, but because it gave me back something I didn't even know I'd lost. Trust in something greater. The certainty that the journey continues, even when our eyes close. The knowledge that there's an invisible web of love that connects us beyond matter, beyond what we can explain. And most powerful of all, the awareness that the most important messages we receive in life don't come shouting. They arrive like this, soft, like a breeze, but with the power to move mountains from within. She was there not only to calm me, but to remind me of what I had forgotten, that I still have a mission here, that the life that continues must be lived with presence, with intention, with an openness to listening to the invisible. And from that moment on, everything became clearer. The small coincidences began to make sense. The silences began to carry answers. And the world, though still the same on the outside, took on new meaning on the inside. That apparition wasn't just a reunion with my sister, it was a reunion with myself, with my story, with my purpose, with the part of me that never stopped believing, even when it seemed like everything was lost. And that's why, today, when doubts return, when fear tries to take over, I close my eyes and remember that gaze, that presence, that message that didn't come from here, but that made everything inside me reborn. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because after that reunion with my sister, something inside and outside of me began to quietly shift. It wasn't a dramatic shift, the kind that announces itself loudly. It was subtle but constant. A transformation that slips through the cracks of routine and gradually shapes the way we see the world, like someone learning to hear again an ancient language they'd always known but had forgotten. And it was in this renewed silence that the signs began to emerge. That same week, I had the same dream 3 times. A field of flowers, a sky with a golden light unlike anything in this world, and the clear feeling of being watched with love. It was her. There was no dialogue, just that serene presence that enveloped me like a blanket on a cold night. But more than the dream itself, it was what happened after waking, an inexplicable calm, a kind of peace that descended like a veil over my thoughts, as if, even without words, she were telling me she was still nearby, that she continued to accompany me on my journey, just from another place. And the signs didn't stop there. Certain songs began playing out of nowhere, at moments that called for that exact melody. Objects I'd lost reappeared in unlikely ways, as if trying to catch my attention. A white butterfly that repeatedly landed on the same window where I used to sit as a child. It could all be coincidence. But after what I've experienced, I simply can't believe in chance anymore like I used to. Today, I see these details as codes, fragments of a subtle communication between planes, as if her soul continued sending messages through paths only the heart can understand. These synchronicities awakened in me a sense of continuous presence. It's not about seeing ghosts or hearing voices. It's about perceiving, feeling, being attentive to the hidden truth that reveals itself in subtlety. And this changed my mindset about everything: life, death, the people around me. I began to pay attention to the small details, the moments of silence, the unexpected encounters. because I began to understand that these moments carry spiritual depths that we often ignore because we're too distracted by what's visible. This journey taught me that spirituality isn't about expecting grand miracles, but about recognizing the small, daily miracles, and that sometimes a soul that departed too soon can remain present in ways that defy logic, but make sense deep down, in a place where reason can't reach. This isn't something that can be explained. It's something that can be felt, that can be experienced. And when we allow ourselves to enter this more subtle frequency, we realize that the spiritual world isn't far away. It's here, now, woven into our reality, just waiting for us to listen again. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we go through an experience like this, we can't go back to being the same person we were before. It's as if something inside you has been rearranged, inside, in the silence. As if that presence, that message coming from a place beyond time or space, opened a new window to see life through different eyes. That's exactly what happened to me. After that encounter, I began to question everything I thought I knew, not in a confusing way, but in a necessary way, as if I were rediscovering a deeper meaning behind every simple thing. The first thing that changed was my relationship with time. Before, I was always rushing, trying to fill voids with urgency. Then I understood that life has its own rhythm, and that many answers only come when the heart is calm enough to listen. It was a shift in mindset. I stopped trying to control everything and started trusting more. Trusting in processes, in pauses, in coincidences that perhaps aren't so random after all. Trusting also in invisible connections, those that connect souls even when matter is no longer here. Another thing that transformed my way of seeing the world was realizing that true love, it doesn't die. It may sound cliché, but when you feel it firsthand, when you hear a voice that wasn't meant to be there, when you reunite with someone who left so long ago, you understand that love is the only language that lives on beyond the body. And this revelation changes everything. Because if love endures, we endure too. In a different form, perhaps, but with the same affection, the same silent presence that comforts, guides, and heals. This experience made me reflect on decisions I'd been putting off, on things I needed to forgive, including myself. It was as if my sister had returned not only to give me a message, but to remind me of who I am, my essence, my purpose, what I came here to experience. Sometimes we lose our own soul amidst obligations, pain, and haste. And when someone on the other side crosses the veil to remind you that you still have a path, it's as if life has been restarted with a new meaning. The hidden truth this experience brought me is that there's much more going on than meets the eye. The spiritual journey isn't made of grand rituals, but of presence, listening, and the courage to recognize that there are signs, yes, all around us, every day. The question is, are you willing to stop and feel, to believe in what you can't explain, but which fills you with a silent certainty? Because that's what stayed with me, a certainty that my sister never completely left, that there's a bridge between worlds, and that she crossed that bridge just to remind me that I still have a lot to live for. And that truly living is remembering to love with intention, to love with presence. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we talk about loss, about death, what hurts most of the time, isn't the silence that follows. It's the fear that what we experienced with the person who passed away will fade over time. But what if I told you there's something within these bonds that simply won't break? That, despite the physical void, there's a connection that continues to pulse, on a different frequency, in a different form, but alive. That's what I began to feel as the days passed after that reunion with my sister. It was as if she were no longer there, not even a memory frozen in the past. But she wasn't here in the way we're used to perceiving her either. She was present in a subtle yet profound way, a sudden thought, a memory that appeared for no apparent reason. A scent that came out of nowhere and made me smile with teary eyes, as if she wanted to tell me that our connection was never severed, only transformed. The love that blossoms between siblings, especially when experienced with purity in childhood, is a kind of love that doesn't depend on words or promises. It's instinctive. It's as if two souls recognized each other physically for a brief moment, but had already walked together in other times. And this familiarity, this intimacy that goes beyond logic, doesn't fade just because a body stops breathing. This hidden truth is what gives you the strength to move forward, even with longing, because you begin to realize that the love you built isn't over. It's just changed form. This new awareness began to guide my decisions. When I needed to choose important paths, she came to mind. When I felt insecure, it was as if her presence enveloped me like an invisible embrace, whispering, "Go, I'm here." And that changes everything. It changes the impact of our pain, changes the way we deal with the behind-the-scenes aspects of life, those layers no one sees, but which make all the difference. It even changes the way we look at others, with more compassion, with more listening, with more presence, because you understand, in your soul, that each person also carries their own reunions, their own signs, their own losses. No matter how much we try to rationalize, there are experiences that can only be understood with the heart. And when that understanding arrives, it heals wounds we didn't even know were still open. It transforms pain into presence, lack into certainty, and it gently reminds us that no one who has been truly loved is lost, that what is of the soul remains. Comment here. Love continues. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because deep down there's a question that silently echoes within anyone who has felt deeply missed. What if someone you lost is still trying to reach you with a message? We tend to think everything ended the moment we left, that the goodbye was final, that there's no longer a possible channel between the two worlds. But what if that's not the case? What if the signs are more subtle than we expect, and therefore more genuine? How often do we ignore that thought that appears out of nowhere, that sudden, unexplained emotion, that insistent memory that comes precisely at moments when we're feeling fragile? What if these manifestations are, in fact, delicate attempts at spiritual contact, messages without envelopes, voices that use no sound, a language made of presence, of intention, of love that insists on continuing to speak, even from the other side? The hidden truth is that many of us don't listen, not for lack of faith, but because of too much noise, the noise of routine, of haste, of unprocessed pain. But if we silence ourselves internally even for a moment, perhaps we'll realize they're still there, sometimes not to say something new, but simply to remind us who we are when we're connected to what matters. And when that connection happens, everything reorganizes. The journey takes on a new rhythm. The pain takes on a new shape, and faith takes on deeper roots. I don't know what story you carry with someone who's gone, but I know that if you're here listening to all this, it's no coincidence. Perhaps your soul is recognizing something that words don't even need to fully convey. Perhaps you're being reminded or invited to look within more closely. Because sometimes what we call coincidence is actually a silent nod from the other side, a way of saying, "I'm still here, and love never left." If this story touched your heart in any way, leave a like below. This will help this message reach others who also need to feel they're not alone. And if you feel part of this journey of faith, of spiritual connection, of reunions that defy logic, subscribe to the channel. Your subscription is crucial for this space to continue growing, bringing light, comfort, and hope to those in need. Because sometimes, all someone needs is a sign, and maybe it's here.